All right, everybody, thanks for joining us today. We have myself and CJ from KPI Analytics, and we're here to talk about why your marketing team needs a concierge data service. So quick on today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about how we wound up where we are and how traditional marketing, as we've been using it, in particular the last 10 years or so, is broken. Within that context, why it's imperative for organizations to adopt and implement ABM strategies, as well as some of the hurdles and keys to successfully implementing ABM. And then we're going to hand it over to CJ. He's going to talk specifically about how a concierge data service is key to maintaining a competitive advantage within this landscape. So you have with us today, I'm Jason Hubbard. I'm Vice President of Growth with SellsIntel. And we have CJ with us from KPI Analytics. He's their CEO. CJ, I'll let you talk briefly about what does KPI do?
There you go. Well, thank you. Happy Friday. So we're an agency, and clients, you can see the right side, there's a few of our logos, companies that do business with us. They're looking for leads, and there's basically three different kinds that it boils down to. One is top of the funnel leads. Two is event registration, audience development and audience acquisition for events. We do a ton of events. Probably half of our practice is based on filling up whiskey tastings, lunch and learns, some webinars, but mainly in-person executive type events. And then down the funnel appointments for clients that need their sales reps and their channel partners to be able to interact and find some leads that can actually convert to opportunity and close them. We've been around for almost 11 years, coming up here in October. We're owner-operated. Myself and two other partners own and operate the business. We actually work here as well. And lots of good, satisfied clients. We fund ourselves since day one through client acquisition. Our clients pay us. We manage their budgets appropriately so we can make some money, but also make sure that we're taking care of them in a way that they can't take care of themselves. And we believe that no other firm can take care of them as well with regards to building pipelines with these different lead types. And again, you can see to the right some of the logos, some of the companies we do business with. And happy to be here. Happy Friday again. And I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, CJ. Like I said, my name's Jason. I'm with SellsIntel. So at SellsIntel, we provide B2B companies with the most accurate data for their buyers that's out there. How do we do that? Our data is 95+% accurate. We have over 85% of those records have direct dial phone numbers. So increasingly, we'll talk about this a little bit, being able to reach out via multiple channels, in particular via email, phone, and social, is becoming crucial. So if you don't have all of those different touch points and a way to get in front of them, then you're being hindered within that. We maintain that quality by re-verifying all of our data every 90 days, and we run all of our data through a human verification process. So all of our data gets machine processed, gets us up to about 70% accuracy, and then we actually have a team of researchers that go through and hand verify every one of those records before we publish them. And then we also use that world-class research team to be able to do what we call research on demand. So that's that concierge service that CJ is going to be talking about. One of the great thing that's great with any of these types of webinars that we do with partners is we always eat our own dog food. So not only at SellsIntel do we use our own data, but CJ and KPI uses SellsIntel's data as well, and vice versa. We use KPI's lead generation services to help with our marketing initiatives. So this partnership is not just a strategic one. We actually are consumers of each other's products and services.
Right.
All right, so like I said in the agenda, we're going to kick it off by talking real briefly about the current state of affairs and sort of how did we wind up here. So why is ABM, account-based marketing, so important right now? And it's because over the last 10 years in particular, we've sort of shot ourselves in the foot. We've had the democratization and rollout of a lot of these marketing automation and sales enablement platforms. The result of that is it made it really, really easy to be able to do sales and marketing at scale. So being able to send out really large blanket email blasts, being able to automate email communication and outreach across multiple different channels. And so we've all been able to get away with sort of a spray and pray approach. If you load enough into the top, then something's going to trickle out the other end of it. and because of all of that, targeting, personalization, all of that stuff has really suffered. And then we're all really getting handicapped by all of this because everybody sort of reacted to it. So, now it's increasingly difficult to get somebody on the phone because everybody's used to robocalls and all of these calls coming in. It's increasingly difficult to even land in people's inboxes, much less get your emails opened or engaged with, because gatekeepers like Google have gotten more and more strict on cracking down on people that are spamming and sending emails. If you're using inaccurate data, you're getting high bounce rates. Then you're going to get shut down really quickly. All of your stuff's going to start landing in spam. And so it's really, there's been a big shift within the market just in the last few years, where you've really got to start honing in, getting strategic, knowing exactly who your target is, what content they're going to be looking for engaging with, and getting strategic with it instead of just trying to go a pure numbers approach to it. So that's sort of how we wound up where we are and why it's so important to implement and embrace ABM at this point.
Right, and to add to that, so somebody really, really smart, I forget who it was, once told me, he said, look, the way the market's going is you can't boil the ocean, you can't go after everyone. Now, I'm a big fan of building a total addressable market, especially if somebody's going after these, of course, enterprise, but even mid-market. We have access to all the best data in the world. SellsIntel is part of that. So we will build a huge total addressable market, and then we'll select based on several different triggers, which we'll talk about in here in a few minutes, who we really want to put the expensive targeting at. And when I say expensive, we're talking about humans actually reaching out to those leads based on some triggers or some intent, all that kind of stuff. But his point was, I'd rather go after the right 5,000 than, all the 500,000. Give me the right 5,000, but figuring out who those are, that's a trick, and we'll talk about it here in a few minutes, but you're totally right. We send out 10 million plus emails a month across all of our clients, and we're constantly working through the gauntlet of making sure that we don't get seen as a spammer. Everything's CAN spam compliant. We do have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, but we do introduce fresh new data that are not subscribers to our brand every month, and we got to make that experience really, really good for them, and that means that the messaging's got to be right on target.
Right. So it's worth pausing at this point. What exactly is ABM? So account-based marketing, we've got a quote here from Marketo, but in a nutshell, account-based marketing is taking a strategic approach to marketing and selling, where you go through and you identify exactly what your ideal customer profile looks like. What does that look like on two primary levels or metrics? One is the company, the account level. So is that company a good fit for your product or service? And then once you've identified those companies that are a fit, who exactly at those companies do you need to be talking to? Who are your decision makers? What are their pain points? What content are they going to be interested in? How do you pitch your product or service specific to those different roles or personas within the organization? So why account-based marketing? So we talked sort of about why things are broken right now. What are some of the benefits that you get from account-based marketing and being able to adopt and adequately put this into implementation? So it aligns sales and marketing. So oftentimes you see in organizations, sales and marketing are sort of doing their own thing. This is always mind-boggling to me, but it runs the gamut. Marketing is oftentimes working off of their own metrics. So it may be number of net new leads, it may be form fills, it may be registrations, it may be traffic to the website. Whatever that is, that doesn't always translate into sales. So if you're working to maximize number of inbound leads, number of form fills, and that's all you're paying attention to on marketing, then you don't have any sort of feedback or way to tailor that or tweak it based off of how successful is sales at actually closing those. And so what oftentimes winds up happening is marketing's optimizing for something completely different than what sales is. And sales is dealing with all kinds of noise and clutter coming from marketing and trying to separate the wheat from the chaff from all of the stuff that marketing's handing them. And trying to figure out what it is they really need to be going after. And so if you take an ABM approach where everybody agrees at the outset, these are the accounts that we want to target, then by its very definition, those accounts that marketing is going after are already been flagged as accounts that sales wants to go after. And so anybody that's coming in for marketing should be somebody that's qualified that sales wants to be going after. The upshot of all of that is it increases your ROI because your salespeople are now becoming more efficient at closing deals because they're getting more qualified and better qualified, not only at the account level, but at the individual persona level that's being passed to them from marketing. And so all of this makes, more likely to close deals in less time from qualification to close deals. And it keeps the salespeople focused on what they need to be doing, namely selling, instead of trying to go through and do additional qualification. Are these, in fact, the leads or the accounts they want to go after or need to go after? And then all of that, the upshot is ABM delivers higher returns than any other marketing approach. So at the end of the day, this is all we really care about. So if that's true, then how do you actually implement it? What are the hurdles to it? How do you be successful at ABM? So there are 5 primary areas that you need to master and where companies get stuck in ABM strategy. First off is you have to identify who your key accounts are. And this is constantly changing, so you need to be constantly reevaluating that. Just because you go through the exercise of identifying and defining what your ICP is, your ideal customer profile, that doesn't mean that that's always going to be that way. That's always shifting, always changing. So you need to go back and revisit that regularly. After you've identified those accounts, those companies, you need to figure out which contacts, which roles you need to be getting in front of those organizations. From there, you need a way to get in front of those people. So just knowing who they are isn't enough. Obviously, you need to have email addresses, phone numbers, physical addresses, LinkedIn profiles, Twitter handles, all of those ways that you need to reach out to them. Then you need to have a coherent strategy for how to use all of that data and those right people that you've targeted at the right companies. How do you break through the noise? Because all of those people are getting, communications, getting pitches from all kinds of people. So how do you rise to the top within that? And then crucial to that is delivering the right content to the right people. So we'll run through these. Identify the best fit. So this is primarily at the account level. 2 primary strategies for doing that is identifying based off of firmographic data. So that's stuff like location, size of the company, age of the company, industry, verticals, all of those general metrics around what does this company look like. So some organizations may sell into a specific vertical or a specific industry, or maybe targeting a certain region, or they may have their sales team broken up by region. So identifying what companies are going to fit within that. And another big one is technographic data as well as buying intent data. And so these are things like what technology platforms are they on? Are they using Salesforce for a CRM? What are they using for marketing automation? Are they using SalesLoft, Outreach for sales enablement? What type of technologies, what type of services are they looking for? Are they looking to hire certain roles within an organization? What's the breakdown of the organization as far as departments and size of those departments? All of these things feed into defining what your ideal company looks like. And a great tool, a great way to go about doing this is look at your closed deals. What have you been successful at in the past? And what kind of trends can you identify across those? Are there certain rules that tend to hold true for those deals that you're able to close, and in particular those deals you're able to close quickly? And once you've figured out those companies you want to target, you need to figure out who at those companies you want to target and what type of messaging you need to send to them. So these days, on average, you're going to have 5 to 13 people at a table making a decision before somebody signs off on buying something. That's a pretty complicated sales process. And each one of those roles, each one of those people at the table are going to have different things that they're interested in. So if one of those people is your chief revenue officer or somebody from finance, then typically they're going to be interested in, what's this going to cost and what's my return going to be? If you need a sales leader, then they're going to be interested in what is this going to do as far as opportunity flow and revenue. If you've got marketing, it's going to be how does this increase our number of leads or our engagement? So knowing what the pain points are for each one of these personas and people that need to be part of that decision, and then tailoring your content around what it is that they're looking for and what problem you're trying to solve for them is going to be crucial. So again, 2 steps in identifying your target. One is at the company account level, and then within those, who are your decision makers at that company that you need to be talking to, and how best do you position yourself with regards to those people and those roles. Then after
right. Hey, one thing I wanted to add there was the fact that a lot of the clients we're dealing, most of our revenue comes from big companies. So they believe they know exactly who they should be selling to and why. And that's great. So we'll start with the firmographic of who they think they should be selling to: healthcare, manufacturing, insurance, whatever it is. And then we'll multi-source the contact. SalesIntel is a really good direct line phone number, clean quality data source for us. We have about a half a dozen other ones we typically go to. And then we'll run it through our channels. We'll get their behaviors. We'll maybe append some intent scoring from a Bombora, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, what we try to get in two accounts in recent history, we're like, good, we understand you're going to sell to these accounts because they have a lot of money and they're the right size and that kind of thing. But why don't you give us access to your last 90 days, 6 months, as long as you can give us closed out deals, things that made the opportunity status, and then they either close won, close lost. And we'll do our own win-loss analysis and maybe either validate what they think is their right company fit who they want to go sell to, or we'll disrupt it a little bit by saying, look, you won. And I'll give you an example. One client we work with, insurance, they had a high close rate and a high ARR on insurance companies, and they sell something that on the surface doesn't compete, but in the end, it does kind of compete with Salesforce.com. The insurance industry has not fully migrated to Salesforce like every other industry seems to have done. So they have something that's better, faster, cheaper than what Salesforce could offer. And that's why they were winning these insurance company deals, but they didn't totally know that. They just figured, well, we're going to sell to everybody because our solution matches, every company out there is big enough to afford our solution. But once we figured out the insurance companies were high adoption, shorter sales cycle, higher ARR because they had not gotten themselves indoctrinated into Salesforce. We figured that out as being, okay, that's our ABM strategy right there. Multiple contacts within, of course, these big insurance companies. And then the other advice we gave and seems to be working is, let's at least come up with the big idea first, rather than trying to go spend a lot of time, money, and effort on personalizing these persona-based messages, if you will. What's the big idea around what you're going to do that can resonate with everybody, the CFO, the VP of Ops, the call center manager, all those guys, and we'll put that data together, get that general messaging out there, and then as we start to see people that are taking interest through digital behaviors, et cetera, and or filling out forms from our Facebook or LinkedIn advertising, then we'll start personalizing from there, because it's a lot more cost effective to try to personalize that message in smaller batches than it is to do this mass assumptive personalization, and then you can actually mess yourself up a little bit. But just food for thought on that last point.
Oh, that's great. In general, how accurate do you find your clients are in what they believe their ICP is once you've gotten in there?
The two cases where we've recently been given access to their closed out deals, closed won and lost. The one was, okay, generally speaking, it looks about right, sounds good. The other case where we figured out that there was a sweet spot, it doesn't mean that there aren't other good ICPs out there, but the sweet spot was insurance companies, and of course, the bigger the better. In this particular case, that was one that was an eye opener. So we were able to figure out, okay, it's better bang for your buck if we focus in on a specific insurance-based campaign versus, boil the ocean type thing. So in general, I think they're pretty right on. We have pretty good conversion rates. We have good data, SalesIntel being part of that. But in those last two cases, the one was we had a disruptor piece of knowledge that came out of understanding what their win-loss record is.
That's great.
Cool.
So yeah, the next step after you've identified your accounts and then the people at the accounts is, how do you go after those people? You need to get in front of them, and so that's where you need data on who those people are, what their email addresses are, what their phone numbers are, and you need to be able to do a broad approach to that. So it's increasingly important these days to do a multi-channel approach. Some people are more engaged in email. Some people are more likely to pick up the phone. Some people are most engaged on social. We've internally had a lot of success lately with reaching out to people and setting appointments on LinkedIn. But at the end of the day, you need to go to where these people are. And oftentimes it takes multiple touches across multiple different channels to finally be able to break through the noise and be able to get in touch with them. But crucial to that, and something that absolutely has to be in place in order for you to do any of that, is have high quality data to be able to do that. And that's really, really important when you look at what happens with bad data in that front. So on the email side, bad data will kill you. I've worked with companies where they ran marketing campaigns on that subpar data, and they killed their domain reputation, and were not able to run any email marketing campaigns for months while they worked on repairing that. That can be a death knell for a lot of companies, especially if you're earlier stage and email is the primary channel for you. So protecting that domain reputation, not having lots of bounces and stuff like that, is absolutely crucial to being able to execute on campaigns. On the sales front, as well as email, for phone calls, email across the board, if you're dealing with a data source that's say 70% accurate, that means a third of your reps' time is being wasted trying to reach out on channels that are not accurate. And any organization that can afford to have a 30% inefficiency in their sales team is not one is an organization that's doing pretty well, but most of us aren't there. Like, we're 30% inefficiency in our sales effort is going to sink a lot of organizations. So there's very, very real cost included in not using accurate data whenever you're trying to execute on this.
Right. Hey, one quick thing on that is that, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but there's this whole thing called the 110-100 rule. So in the case of, this is exactly what we found with SalesIntel, with the research on demand, is that it makes more sense when we find data problems. Here's the 110-100 rule. Again, I'll butcher it. For every dollar you spend to prevent a bad record from hitting your system, you'll spend $10 to fix it once you find it, and you'll spend $100 in damages if you fail to actually have quality data in your system. So what we had done is, throughout the years, you'd have a bad record. A rep would say, rep's calling out. They would just tag the record as bad quality, and we incentivize them to say, hey, spend a minute trying to fix it. If you can't fix it, just count it as bad. And then a lot of that stuff just died. And then we put an operation in place where, okay, every so often, every month or so, we would pull out all the stuff that we thought we could fix, but the reps couldn't do it themselves. We put it in a lower cost place for them to go out and do research into all of our data resources and try to fix that data, get the phone number corrected for this person, or if this person left, replace it with the other person that has that role, that kind of thing. And it's not our core competency. Our job is to go out there and get leads with the good data that we have, and if it's bad data, we need to get it somewhere else to get remediated, if you will. And that's where research on demand came in handy for two specific clients where, hey, every night, the stuff that gets tagged bad, we'll upload it into the system, have it fixed, and sometimes between 24 and 48 hours, we get that record back, clean, ready to go, and we're back in cadence, and nobody had to suffer on our side. So again, to kind of reiterate, we try to prevent bad data from getting in the system. We have a pretty good process to make sure that doesn't happen. But when it does happen, we want to remediate it very, very quickly at as low cost as possible. And what you can't have is just a bunch of bad data aging, decaying, getting bad, ruining your delivery rates, wrecking your IPs. Pretty soon you can't operate. So the 110-100 rule, as I butchered it, somebody else can Google it up and they'll be able to articulate it better than I can.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, once you have their data, then how do you reach out to them? Like I mentioned, these days it's got to be a multi-channel approach. In general, you're best off starting with email. It has the lowest cost, both as far as time, effort, and money to be able to send emails and get those out. In general, though, you're going to expect upwards of 13 emails that are going to have to be sent before somebody's going to respond. The old adage of 8+ touches to be able to get somebody to respond or engage. If you're only using email, then that creeps up to 13. So very real indication of why you need a multi-channel approach. Next up, as far as level of priority, is call. So average of 8 calls to get connected, and a great way for you to be able to identify which ones to prioritize are those that have been engaging with your email. So ones that have been consistently opening your emails, in particular, somebody clicks through on those. If you're able to tie those to visitors to your website, stuff like that, it makes for a great way to be able to prioritize which ones to be calling. And then equally important, social selling. As I mentioned, we've been having a lot of success on LinkedIn lately. You can also implement this in a holistic approach with targeted ads. So there's platforms like, one of our partners is Metadata, where they allow you to be able to upload a list of accounts or domains that you're going after. And so they can use stuff like a reverse IP lookup and cookies and stuff like that to serve your ads to people at those organizations. So, as you're emailing them, as you're calling them, they're also seeing your ads around the internet. And so all of this, allows you to stay top of mind with them. And then interestingly, some people are starting to play around with and find success in doing direct mailing. So actual physical mail to somebody's mailbox. Right. Which is old school, but it also speaks to how much things have changed and how clogged the channels we've been using the last few years have gotten. That people are finding success in a place that had pretty much been dead for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that was because it was a standalone channel. So it's like, okay, it's an expensive one too. So when you're talking about all these multi-channel, the approach here, it makes total sense. The good thing about like a SalesIntel data file we will get, maybe they're niche titles because we had to use user research on demand because it's a niche set of people within a group, whether it's in DevOps or security ops. Once you get that, then okay, set up a unique UTM for a Facebook advertisement, load in that data into the back end of Facebook, and then that way you're actually hitting those specific targets. You're not going in and leveraging their demographic information and clicking on a bunch of information in Facebook, which is one of the best databases in the world. You're actually hitting the people you've already determined through other data research that these are the people you want to hit. And if they fill out a form, you can tell by the UTM where they came from. Okay, great. You do the same thing on LinkedIn. And they've actually opened a few emails. They weren't false positive opens by some security software, but you've also called them, but they haven't returned your phone call yet. But you know that they're right in that sweet spot. They've taken other behaviors. They've done other behaviors that make sense for us to go hit them. Then they're down the funnel from a lead generation standpoint. You can afford to send a $50 mailer or the $10 mailer, whatever it is, to make yourself, make a bigger impression upon them. But you don't do it mass anymore. Direct mail is kind of dead when it comes to that. But when you get them down the funnel a little bit, where they become a nurturer because you spoke to them a little bit, but they're not going to be looking at that solution for 6 months to a year. Perfect. I'm going to keep you on my tickler file, as I used to call it. But that means I'm going to send them the Starbucks card. I'm going to send them the Amazon card. I'm going to send them a drone, whatever it is that you can afford as part of your budget, depending on the average selling price of your solution. That's where direct mail absolutely comes into play, and we do that probably on half the projects we do on the lead generation front, not so much on the events. We're doing those types of things. Makes total sense.
And the last piece, this is where you kind of bring it all together. You've identified who the people are at the right companies. You've got their information to be able to get in front of them. You've got a multi-channel approach. Now you need to focus on what exactly you're delivering to them. And so this is where it's crucial to know, like I talked about earlier, what are the pain points for those people? What are they interested in? Where are you going to engage with them? So a pitch to a head of sales is going to be very different from a finance person within an organization. Security is going to have very different concerns versus, sometimes IT. All of these different roles within an organization have different things they're interested in. So this is where you want to service the right content to the right people, but also the right content at the right stage of their journey. So people that are brand new to you, don't know who you are, what your company is, what you do, then you want to focus on value add content that's going to help build your reputation and brand awareness with them and show that you've got something to add, something valuable to give them. Versus somebody who's further down the funnel, they've engaged, they've indicated like they understand the problem. they're looking for a solution. Then it's a different type of content that you're getting in front of them at that stage, where it's going to be more focused on what their problem is and how to solve it, all the way down to, somebody's close to a buying decision, and at that point it's a straight up sales pitch. This is why you should be going with us as opposed to somebody else. Whoop. All right, so within all of this, it should be a question that everybody has. Like, if ABM is this powerful and has this kind of results, why isn't everybody doing it? And the short answer to it is ABM's not easy. ABM's hard. All of these steps we've talked about, these are very labor-intensive processes. The reason why people have erred on the side of taking shortcuts and becoming spammers and relying on robocalling or dialer platforms, stuff like that, is that's a whole lot easier to do. It's a whole lot easier just to go build a list, fairly indiscriminately, load it through, and then expect based off of volume something to come out the other end of it. That's not to say that that's your best strategy is going to get you the best return, but as far as upfront effort and knowledge about what you're doing, stuff like that, the barriers are pretty low. Successfully implementing ABM takes strategy, takes time, takes effort. And you can leverage technologies, you can leverage solutions, you can leverage surfaces that make this easier or more efficient. But at the end of the day, it takes an investment of time and effort, in some cases, money, and it requires having this be an actual priority within your organization. All right, so all of this has been to this point about ABM in general and why it's so important, but something that's pretty unique within the industry is this idea of concierge or custom data solution. And this is one of the big ways that CJ and KPI have been using SellsIntel. So I'm going to hand this over to CJ and talk through detail a little bit about this.
Yeah, so what's interesting is if you look at some of KPI's messaging in the marketplace, we call ourselves a demand concierge. We are marketing execution as a service, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, the only way you can be a concierge on the demand front to go out and get these leads, or in very short order, somebody comes to us and says, look, I know you need 4 weeks, but I've got 2.5 weeks for an event that I thought my salespeople were going to fill for me, and I can't do it now. I need your help. The only way that we can do that is to be the lead DevOps, the agile partner to help get to market fast. So our core strength is taking really good data. We'll improve the data, and we got our own lists and all that's good. All that's good, but our core thing that clients pay us for is for those leads to come out the other side and filling those events. So if we're going to be the demand concierge, as it were, then we need some sort of concierge service on our side to help us with the data, especially when it comes to some of these more enterprise account-based marketing projects, because there's a limited set of accounts, and you can't just go, okay, well, that's a bad record. I'll go ahead and I don't even care. I got so many other ones I can go after. It doesn't matter. No, there are specific roles within some of these enterprise accounts that we have to be able to get a message to. And if the record's bad, we need to be able to get it cleaned up and get it into the machine, as it were, to get the message out to market. So we're subscribing to several different data sources, a lot of usual suspects. When it comes to firmographic, I don't think there's anybody more complete, I'll say, than a Dun & Bradstreet. And once we figure out who those accounts are that we should be going after, that ICP account, and we want to go build as big a list as we can possibly build for that ICP set of accounts, great. D&B is a great place to go because they're all inclusive. They are not the best place to go to get the actual contacts within the operation. So you got to go to multiple sources. And then even then, when you start getting into some specialized titles, you're going to need to go to, you're going to have research on demand for those. We can't do it ourselves as cost effectively as we can do it with SalesIntel. So that's why we use you all. But at the same time, as the data flows through the process, we're coming up with gremlins, as it were, with regard to the data. We need to get those kind of taken care of on a one-off basis. So research on demand comes into play there. And plus, when it comes to human verified data, particularly with SalesIntel, that's a great starting point anyway for building out the right contacts within these organizations, which again, we typically start with the DMV because they're more inclusive. So we need the data concierge the same way that our clients need to use us as the demand concierge or the audience acquisition concierge for their specific events. So that's one aspect of it. If you go to that next slide, I think we've got some use cases.
Yeah.
I'll kind of walk through those.
Yeah, one quick note
Go ahead.
real fast is,
yeah.
So one of the challenges on the data side is for pretty much all of us, we have a bigger data pool on the back end than what we publish or give people access to. And that's
right.
That data is just, it's not as accurate or reliable as what we want to be able to offer to people. And so the challenge for everybody in the space that we're in is, what do we prioritize out of that big pool of data that's not to the level that we want it? Because it is a labor-intensive process to get the verification up to the level that we want it at in order to offer it for our customers. And the same thing goes for our customers out there. You know, our focus, because of within that dilemma, is we want to try and prioritize the data that's going to have the most widest appeal and reach. So, you know, the ones that most customers are going to want. That's not always going to fit with what an individual customer's ICP is. And so you're going to have, you know, the total addressable market for an individual customer. You're going to have the data that we've prioritized, and there's going to be some overlap there. But inevitably, there's going to be a whole lot more data on the back end that's going to match that ICP than what we publish. And so there's a sort of a misalignment or mismatch there that happens a lot of times. If you don't have some sort of a research on demand or concierge type service.
Totally makes sense. And that's a very good point, because the human verified data, I don't know how many millions of that we have access to right now, but I know it's growing all the time. But then when we do get in that situation where, and this is a kind of a business decision for any company out there, it's like, do I spend tens of thousands, and in some cases hundreds of thousands and millions, to subscribe to some of these really, really quality data services out there for lists that are going to sit there most of the time? I'm never going to leverage them. They're not all their data is in my ICP, and I'm just paying for data to sit there that I'm never going to use? Or does it make more sense, because I'm going after a small set of 1,000 accounts or even 100 accounts, where I know exactly who I need to be targeting, to have access to a research on demand with SalesIntel, with a lot of good human verified already. But then once I know what they don't have, I say I need the following as well, and they'll go research it, give me the quality contacts, give me the updates as they get them, and it's probably better, faster, cheaper to do it that way in many, many cases than it is to go spend a lot of money on a bunch of different subscription services. And a lot of that boils down to who are you going after, what's your business, all that kind of stuff. But that's one thing we see with SalesIntel as well. You won't have everything we need. So we either go, A, do I have it somewhere else, even with our own data sets? And if not, then B, I go to research on demand and I round out my list and I get to work.
Great.
And I think we kind of, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I talked about the big pool. So, currently we have 3.2 million published records. All of those have been hand verified at the 95% accuracy level that I was talking about. But on the back end, we have 30 million machine process records. And so, you can see there the needle in the haystack problem for any data provider out there is, which out of those, we've managed to hand verify and publish roughly 10% of the total pool of people we have in the system. So, whenever you're having to figure out 1 out of 10 that you're going to prioritize for a research team, that becomes a challenge. And, inevitably the only way to approach that is, what are the most demanded contacts, organizations, titles across, as broad a swath of potential customers as possible. And then the way that we work and partner with our customers is, are there specific, accounts, titles, people in that big pool of 30 million that we can prioritize for you? And so it makes a best of both worlds.
Totally. It's such a great service.
Cool. So yeah, CJ, you've got a couple of use cases here. You've been using this for a while. Love for you to talk through kind of what that experience has been like.
Yeah, and I guess I'll start from both of these use cases are similar in that they're B2B scenarios. They are acquisition targets. We're not, we do some work where we're going after install base and expansion opportunities within somebody's install base, adding the right contacts to that. Both of these are acquisition type businesses. They're both publicly traded. They both have expectations they set with the market that they have to go hit. They need velocity, but they're also, in the one case on the left, it's a 6-figure plus, in many cases, 7-figure annual recurring revenue for those types of targets. It's 700 enterprise accounts, very specific roles within those enterprise accounts. They're a security ops solution provider. And we have, that's a custom build database that we needed to specify the titles and the exact companies, and even in some cases, locations that SalesIntel had to help us round out. So then we take that list. It's in production now, and we're doing very simple outbound strategy on this one. We're doing Facebook because now we know who these contacts are. Facebook does a good job at taking that business email and matching it up to people that Facebook knows everything. So I don't need to give them the Gmail account or the Hotmail or the Yahoo that's associated with the Facebook account. If you have a business email, they know who you are. We're able to get messages in front of them through that channel, LinkedIn, and then it's email and outbound calling. And this is a high touch type campaign because it's only 700 accounts. We have a lot of outbound calls going into each account, whether they're showing intent or whether they're showing behaviors or not. So that one was where research on demand was critical because there was some specific niche titles within those organizations. And it wasn't like we could say, well, we don't have the titles for this 100 organizations. We'll just get another 100 organizations that look just like it. Now it wasn't an option, only 700 accounts. We got to do a good job with all of them. On the right-hand side, same type of thing again, publicly traded, they're setting expectations, they got to grow. It's high growth, smaller deal, average deal size, and research on demand is important. It's not critical in this case, but we still use it because it's mid-market type accounts. There's thousands of them to go after. But when you do find that, that organization that you look at their technology infrastructure, they're using a competitive solution that's a PBX, and not on unified communications or cloud communications yet. You want to find that right person. If we don't have it in the data set, we need to send that over and get it within 24 to 48 hours. We can wait that long because we have plenty of data to go after in the meantime, and it's not worth our SDR's time to go out there and research that contact. And obviously we've already, by the time it makes it into our system for an outbound call, we've exhausted all of our resources, including SalesIntel. And that's what we have. We have, we use a lot of name brands. If I threw them all out, there'd be 3 or 4 of them. Everybody go, yeah, I use them too. And there'd be 3 or 4 nobody's ever heard of. And once we exhaust all that and we still don't have that right person while we're in the flow of the operation and that rep says, nope, not the right person, or they've left and they wouldn't give me the name of the new person, we got to get that over for the cost of you all doing it within 24 to 48 hours and getting it back to us. It makes total sense for our reps to not even worry about it. So those are 2 use cases that we're using the SalesIntel on right now. And we've got more in the hopper and more coming down the pipe.
Awesome.
This slide here, I thought this made sense to add this as sort of a finishing thought. If you look at the base, because at the end of the day, there's all kinds of digital channels, there's a social, there's syndication, all that kind of stuff. But eventually, for most of the high-ticket sales that we're doing, our lead generation for high-ticket sales we're doing, a human being is going to get involved. They're going to be calling out to a record and trying to get that person on the phone, qualify them, and either get them BANT qualified and or even set an appointment, all that kind of stuff. And BANT is probably a topic for another webinar, but there's some issues with that. But keep on moving here. The bottom line is, eventually all that data is going to sort of funnel its way down into a caller's queue, whether that's at the client side or whether it's us, it doesn't matter. And then it's going to boil down to, the classic call center stuff is dials and talk time and cases resolved and leads generated, and I get all that. Talk time is kind of the least important to us in any given day because these days it's hard to get people on the phone. So I'm very, very interested because SDRs don't get any cheaper just because it's harder to get decision makers on the phone. I'm interested in all these different list sources and all these different reasons a record makes it into an outbound queue. How many dials, and this is the bottom one is the only one that's the higher ratio, the better. We're looking for our reps, and through our systems, they're able to make a lot of calls per hour. But who cares if they're not quality calls? Who cares if they make 25 dials an hour? and they get 1, 2 people on the phone, and they blow those conversations because they're not the right people, or because they don't have the right skill set, they don't understand their value prop. We spend a lot of time doing call coaching and all that, and we care about their proficiency in those systems. They got to make a lot of dials. But beyond that, how many dials do I need to make to get to a dialogue, a conversation with a qualified decision maker? How many dialogues do I need to have to get to a deliverable, which is basically, in this case, a meeting set or a qualified lead or a registrant to an event, however you want to look at it? How many of those deliverables result in a discovery call with a salesperson or a channel partner, salesperson, et cetera? How many of those discovery calls does it take to get to an opportunity? And how many of those opportunities does it take to get to a win? So in the cases where we are fully integrated with our clients, which is probably about a half a dozen right now, we have full visibility, integration into Salesforce.com or whatever CRM they're using. We understand all of these metrics, and there's a feedback loop on it too. So we can kind of come back and go, okay, the source KPI's gold list is number 1. The forms that were filled out on Facebook is number 2. All those kinds of things. We're looking at lead source and list ref are 2 of the fields we have in our system. And you know, where do we get the biggest bang for the buck on dials to dialogues, dialogues to deliverables, deliverables to discovery calls to opportunity, and then to win. And we got to be in lockstep with our clients to figure those things out. But in the end, we have a whole model set up on this. This is obviously just the image of it. We have a whole model set up to figure out, okay, we're doing really well on, if you take it down to the SDR level, the high dials per hour doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. It means that their activity's up. It's good. They're working hard, but are they working smart? Do they get enough conversations that turn into that deliverable, or at least a nurture, which is not on this chart? And in the nurtures, how many of those convert? So we have to work well with our clients, model this out, do heat maps on where we're seeing the most productivity by list source, by SDR, all those kinds of things, and by industry, by decision maker type. And that's why we're called KPI Analytics. We'll manage the hell out of this. We'll measure the heck out of it. And at the end of the day, what you want to know is that, hey, the list source, the reason that record got into the system, is it my top performer, or at least in the top quartile of my performers, high performing data sources? And that's what we look at all the time. And so SalesIntel, a plug on SalesIntel, it's a high dial to dialogue ratio. So in many cases, depending on the source and depending on the solution, you might have to make 20 calls to get the right decision maker on the phone. And if that's the case, SalesIntel will probably be about half of that. So if it's 10 to 1, 10 dials to get 1 conversation, SalesIntel will be 5 dials to get 1 conversation. And then from there on out, how many of those turn into quality leads? It's about on par with the other data sources. And all that tells me is those direct lines and the quality, the data cleanliness and the quality of that data is really, really high. And then from there on out, it depends on the value proposition and the skill of the rep and all those kinds of things.
Great.
And for anyone that's listening, if they want to see a model that shows these metrics in action in a spreadsheet, soon to be Google Data Studio, I'm happy to share. Just reach out to me, CJ at kpiroi.com.
Cool. All right.
All right.
Everybody for joining us today. CJ, it's been great to have you on. Lots of great information, topics covered here. Information for reaching out to myself or CJ is here on this slide. We'll also be sending out an email with a link to the deck as well as the recording. And thanks to everybody for joining us today. I hope everybody has a great weekend.